Our presenter for the 9 a.m. time slot is Anita Hayden. She is from Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania, and will be sharing with us her Capstone project, improving productivity in the office space through furniture design. Please join us in welcoming her.
So, welcome everyone to Capstone's Presentations 2020. I'll be starting us off today. My name is Anita Hayden, and the project that I've been working on is creating a furniture line for the office space. So before I get into any of the designs that I've been working on, I first want to address what's the problem we're trying to solve. And the problem is that the professional workspace needs an update. So many of you are familiar with this picture that's on the screen. It is the cubicle that many offices use, and while it was a great innovation at the time with allowing many workers to fit into one space within a business, it does have a very gray and dull and sort of mechanicalized feeling to, it gives a mechanicalized feeling to the space, and I believe that it needs to be updated to fit the current lifestyle needs for the work office space today. So why is this a problem we should be addressing to begin with? And I believe it's because that we spend most of our time at work. So here's just a point of view that I created from a person that works a 9 to 5. As you see highlighted in blue is the amount of time they spend at work, which is 8 hours. That's the most time they spend at a place within the day, except for sleep. And so it does, it's a pretty big chunk of our daily lives that are spent at work. So the American Time Use Survey of 2018 say that the average American spends 8.5 hours a day at work. And so this is a significant part of our daily lives. So the proposed solution that I have is that I want to make time spent in the office more intentional and more productive. Ben Chanos, in his book, Happy by Design, A Guide to Architecture and Mental Well-Being, states that happiness is an incredibly important but often overlooked aspect of our lives. It can result in improved productivity in the workplace and better learning in students. Most importantly, it can drastically improve people's health, people's quality of life, and physical and mental health. And I would like to point out this connection between happiness, productivity in the workplace, and physical and mental health. So again, what are we trying to solve? We want to improve happiness, productivity, and health, and that all helps with reducing stress. Just to go into a little bit of the science behind stress and how our body produces it, it all starts in the hypothalamus, which there releases a chemical called the corticotropin releasing hormone, or CRH, and that is what regulates sleep, appetite, and balance among our other hormones. So again, it starts in the hypothalamus, and then it creates the CRH hormones that goes into the pituitary gland, which creates the adrenocorticotropic hormone, or the ACTH, and then that goes into the adrenal cortex. In the adrenal cortex, that releases the glucocorticoid hormones into the blood, and that is what regulates our metabolism and sleep-wake cycle. And so ideally, we want this hormone to be high in the morning and low at night. In Herman Englert's book, Sussing Out Stress, they stated that any activity of the stress system counts as an emergency event, and when the emergency ends, the system must quickly be turned off so the affected organs can recover. And so many of you have probably felt the effects of stress, either mentally or physically, and so it's important to have that space where our body can rest from stress. And Herman Englert goes on to say, when external circumstances stimulate the stress system repeatedly and never stops reacting, and the organs are never allowed to rest, which is definitely, there's a balance between having our stress system be active and allowing it to find that rest for our body to recover. And so that leads to the conclusion that the goal for the workplace is that we should work hard and rest well. And so how I like to solve this with a furniture line is that I want to create a furniture line that makes work intentional. So have those spaces for productivity and have those spaces for recharging. Because I believe a happy, well-rested worker makes good work, and it can promote a healthy lifestyle within the office. I just want to emphasize the importance of environment, and Dak Kopek's book, Health and Well-Being for Interior Architecture, he states that designers are poised to play a meaningful role confronting growing rates of physical and mental illness, merging their creativity with new scientific evidence linking health and well-being to many environmental elements that humans regularly encounter. And so what have I mentioned before that is an environmental element that we regularly encounter on a daily basis? That's work. So going to a little bit more detail with what I'd actually like this furniture line to look, I'm going to be creating 2 pieces of furniture for productivity and 3 pieces of furniture for the recharge space. So for productivity, I would like to design a work desk that gives people an individual space that they can go to, return, and have it be like a home base for them, as well as a standing table where they can stretch their legs and have it be a more flexible space that like multiple people could use. And then for the recharge, have a individual nook for a individual recharge space. And then opposed to that, a sofa and chair for a more collaborative recharge space. And then a cafe table and chairs for people to go for the lunch breaks and be able to eat their food. So some of the possible pain points and stressors that I thought of before tackling this furniture line is trying to think of the problems of a lack of space for the user, too crowded of a desk, having the coworker be too close to others, having a lack of outlet accessibility, a lack of comfort, not having their space feel personalized enough, not enough soundproofing, having a place to store files and documents, a place to put their pens and pencils, a place to pin up reminders, and then poor lighting. So how will this furniture line solve the problem? Going into this, I wanted to look into color, shape, and lighting and see how those elements impact us and find a way for them to either create a productive environment or a relaxing environment. And so to summarize some of the research that I found, for a more relaxing design, cool colors that are more desaturated have a calming effect, as well as circles have this feeling of continuousness. So it has this, again, it has that calming, relaxing effect that everything's continuing, as well as a square, which has the sense of stability to it. And then opposed to that is a more energizing design. We'll use dynamic lines and warm colors with a more saturated colors to them. And as you can see, I put the rectangle and triangle at an angle to emulate a sense that it's on edge or about to fall, which gives a sense of there's like energy, there's movement in the design. So keeping in mind this difference between productivity and relaxation, I then tackled trying to design this furniture line. So the first piece that I'd like to show you is for the productive furniture, and it is the work desk space. So my goals for this piece going into it was to create an individualized space workers can return to, incorporate warm colors without overpowering the user, replace the use of the cubicle in office spaces, have adaptable lighting for the user, and then add space to personalize the work desk itself. Here's just some of the ideation that I created when trying to think up this piece. As you can see, I sort of quickly drew some ideation and then moved on to the program SketchUp to kind of figure out my ideas a little bit better. And then this is the current iteration of the work desk that I have. Just a couple details for the design is that there is a large working space for the desk, and above that is shelving space, as well as there's drawers and other shelving space, which you can see later for future renderings that I'll be showing you. And then I have the use of dynamic line throughout the piece with the diagonals on the side of the work desk, as well as in the shelving and the desk itself. And then there's hanging lights above the desk, which users can turn on and control to fit their needs, as well as a corkboard in the back, which can be used to pin up reminders, as well as work as a little bit of soundproofing for the unit. So here's just some of the different views for the top, front, and side view. So the piece is about 7 feet wide and then 5 feet deep, with a 3 feet by 3.5 area in the work desk for the person to sort of move around and sit in. So here's some of the renderings with the different views. So you can see the two sides, and the front view of the work desk. And so now to look on the inside of the work desk, you can see the left side and the right side. And on the left side, you can see all the shelving and drawers that I included, as well as hooks on the side to put jackets or a backpack. And then you can also see that diagonal dynamic line that moves from the table to the top of the wall of the work desk. And then here's just an image for human reference of what a person might look like within the space. And so on the right side of the work desk is a control panel with 2 sliders and a on and off button. So the top slider controls the temperature, so the user could choose either a light that emulates daylight, that's like a cooler light, or they can slide it over to a more warmer light that's normally used in the evenings, as well as a control for the brightness. And in my research into looking at how lighting affects productivity, normally a light that emulates daylight can help people be more productive, but some people find a warmer light to help them more. And so pretty much at the end of the day, it does depend on what the user wants. So I added that customizability aspect to this piece. And then also you can see there are outlets on the same panel next to the control panel. So here's just some of the possible layouts that this work desk can be placed within the office space. Each of the trapezoid is one of the units, so there's a lot of adaptability and diversity with how this product can be used within the office space itself. So how does this product actually promote productivity? As I mentioned before, I use the dynamic lines to capture this feeling of movement, of as you can see on the side of the piece, as well as choosing that trapezoidal shape to begin with. And then for the color choices, I used the warmer yellows, but I kept them a little bit desaturated, and I balanced it with a white so the color didn't overpower the user. So moving on to my next piece is the standing desk. So my goals for this piece was to create a flexible space for multiple users and to have varying heights for different needs of the user. So have a standing desk that can move to the height necessary, have a light fixture above the desk, and then incorporate the warm colors into the piece without overpowering the users. So here's some ideation for it. For this one, I pretty much just drew a really quick sketch for it and then went straight into figuring out on SketchUp. And then this is the current iteration for the standing desk. Just to point out some of the design elements is that I use the use of dynamic line with like the work desk, throughout the piece, as well as I kept the same hanging lights as the work desk for this one. And then again, the desk moves up and down to fit the height of the user. Here's just some of the views for the standing desk. And so here's my renderings for 3 of these standing desks put together to give you kind of an idea of what they could look like on a wall. And as you can see, there are different sizes for the yellow diagonal, and that shows pretty much where the desk height is. And so when the desk moves up, the yellow space decreases, and then the desk moves down, the yellow space increases. And then here's just a reference for what it could look like if people were working at these. And then, so how does this promote productivity? Like I've mentioned before, the use of dynamic line, and then having that yellow pop of color that shows up when the desk moves up and down. And I tried to keep it within the same color scheme as the work desk, and I used the same wood as well as a similar yellow color as the work desk. Now moving on to the relaxing furniture that I designed. The first is the individual nook. So my goals going into designing this piece was to create seating for one person that wants to take a break from work, have a space to allow an individualized recharge space, to have a pull-down table to place for the user to place their laptop or to be able to eat at, have easily accessible outlets, as well as have a footrest that can like pop up from under the seat that people could place their feet on and be able to rest. So here's just some of the ideation of the Nook. And this is the current iteration. As you can see, there's the same hanging lights as in the other pieces, and this has the a seat with a cushioned back as well as the bottom part, and then that footrest that pops up. And then it also has the table that you can pull down with outlets, and then the light switch located underneath the pull down table. And I made this space have a enclosure to have the feeling of having a small little space that is like your space of your own that you can go into and recharge. But I kept the top part having bars so it didn't feel too claustrophobic or too enclosed, and you can look up and see the space above you. So here's just some of the views for the individual Nook. And then here are my renderings for this piece. And so there is a call out to that table that you can pull down. And then here you can see the outlets and then the footrest that pops up a little bit easier. And then here is a reference, again, to get an idea of what a person might look like in the space. So how does this piece promote relaxation? So to begin with, for the color choices, I had a cooler color choices that were more desaturated, a balance of darker and lighter. So it had like a very, again, balanced and even feel to it. And then I incorporated squares throughout the piece to give that sense of stability. So you can see that square in the seating as well as the back and then the table. And then you can also see a more like round element to the arch above just to give that more organic sort of feel to it. Moving on to the sofa and chair that I designed. So my goal for this piece was to have a collaborative space for recharging. For the sofa to be able to hold at least 3 people, for the design to give a sense of stability, and of course to have comfortable seating. So here's just some of the ideation. For this one, I kind of knew what direction I wanted from the get-go, so I pretty much just ideated on the green drawing that you see there. And then here's the current iteration of the piece itself. It has a headrest with the cushioned bottom in the back of the seat. And then I incorporated a metal square throughout the design to give that sense of stability. And then here's the views for the sofa. You can see that square on the side. And then here's the views for the chair with the same square and dimensions. And so then here's some of the renderings for this piece. As you can see, there's a front view and the back view of that sofa. And on the back view, you can see that square metal shape. And that is the same shape as the armrests of the sofa. And on the chair, for the back of the chair, it has that same metal square. So there's a sort of coherent feel to the sofa and chair. And then here's just a reference for what it could look like with people in this piece. So how does this promote relaxation? As I mentioned before, in the NOOK, I incorporated the square to give that sense of stability. And the color choices that I chose for this it was the same colors as the NOOK seating. And so they have that coherent element to it, as well as it being a more calming green color that has like a more deeper hue to it. Then moving on to the last piece that I have is the cafe table. So my goal for this piece was to have an area designated for lunches or snacks, be able to have one table that can fit 6 people, and have it include the overhead lights, for it to have easily accessible outlets for the user's computer or phone, and then have matching chairs that can fit comfortably under the table. So here's just some ideation for this piece. So this is the current iteration of the cafe table. Again, I use these overhead lights, which I pretty much incorporated in almost all my pieces. So this furniture line can be coherent and have that feeling of it being an actual furniture line that connects to each other, whether it's productive or relaxing. And similarly to the other relaxing pieces, I incorporated that square metal, the metal square for the base of the chair. And then the chairs themselves, there can be 6 seats, and the top of the chair matches with the bottom of the chair matches with the top of the table, so they can fit easily onto the table. And then there's outlets on either side of the table for the user to use. So here's just some of the views of the table, and then some of the views of the chair. And then here are my renderings of this piece. You can see that call out to the outlets that I have. And then you can also see how the chair rests right onto the table. So here's the an image with a person sitting at the table eating their lunch. So how does this promote relaxation? Like I mentioned before, for my other pieces, I gave it that square metal shape to give that sense of stability, as well as I have the metal framework for the table itself to sort of ground it into the space. And of course, I used the cool colors that have more desaturated color to them. And then throughout the furniture line, I used the same wood to give that, again, a coherent feel to my furniture line. So this is just the overview of my furniture line. You have the 2 pieces at the top, which are the productive furniture pieces, and the 3 pieces at the bottom, which are the relaxing furniture pieces. Thank you for listening to my capstone presentation. If you have any questions, you can text the number on the screen, and they will be moderated and asked.
Great job, Anita. I have a few questions here. Let's see. First one is, why did you decide to add legs to the standing desk design? And can the desk be moved to the ground level?
Yeah, so the legs that you can see there are actually the mechanical parts that push the table up and push the table down. And so the desk cannot reach the ground level, and the metal pieces that you see on the table don't actually move, but it's just the table itself that's pushed up and then pushed back down again.
Excellent. When the standing desk moves up and down, does it cover up the dynamic element on the back wall? And this person also wanted to say that the NOOK is super cool.
Thanks. So when the standing desk is pushed up, at the very max height, it does cover up that yellow line. I wanted that to be an indicator for how much space you have left, and then you can bring it back down again to when it touches the bottom of the metal rods.
Besides color, light, and shape, did you also consider how material can affect mood?
Yeah, so that's mainly why I wanted to use wood, because it felt like a very neutral, sort of earthy kind of feeling. And so I kept that in mind. And for the work desk in NOOK, I tried to not use plastic or like super reflective surfaces, so there wasn't any glare when the individual was working.
What are some of the challenges that you overcame?
So for the work desk, it went through a lot of different iterations. And so when I started it, I actually had the desk on the other side, on like the smaller opening of the trapezoid. And I just had to figure out what was the best way to use the space and give the person enough space to be able to comfortably use the desk, but also have the work desk be a good place to work. So spent a lot of time working on that desk.
Good. This question asks, you redesigned the cubicle, but many offices also like the open office design concept. What would you propose for those offices?
So when researching into this, I looked into kind of like open offices versus the use of the cubicle, and I found that a lot of offices are moving towards the open sort of office feel, but there were some problems that were coming up with that, with people not having enough space to work in, and then having distractions with having your neighbor, right next to you. And so my suggestion would be to think about using a more individualized workspace. And if they still want to keep that open feel, the standing desks are a great way to have that sense of community still, since it's a more flexible space for people to go and work at.
Good. This question, final question before I hand it over to Carlos. When working with the calming colors and more productive colors, did you notice any changes in your productivity on the project?
Like when I was working on the piece, did I notice a change in my productivity? Is that the question?
I believe that's the question. I will also follow up with an addition of my own. Did this affect the way that you see your own working space? And did you make any changes because of your understanding of how spaces affect your work?
Yeah, so actually when I first created these slides, they all had the blue color to them. And then after looking into my research a little more, I changed it to have the yellow background with more of like blue borders to it. And so at least in that aspect, I used the yellow color to try to like keep my viewers more engaged with my slides. And within my own office space, looking into the light aspect of it, I realized how important it was for when I was working on my project to have a good environment when it comes to lighting, as well as um, keeping the space with a more brighter feeling, and that I could see that impact my productivity levels when working on this.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Carlos now, who has, I believe, a question and a comment.
Yeah, Anita,
Carlos?
thank you, Gabe. Anita, first of all, I'd like to comment on the well-organized presentation that you have, and everything, especially the explanation of your purpose or reasons why you design and what you present are based from. I have mainly a couple of comments, and one is just more like a reminder, making sure that all your ergonomical dimensions are met, and especially the handicap requirements.
Yes.
So, yeah, those are important. I also noticed that your furniture design shapes are mainly focused on the functional side of them. Um, the style, I think, could have been the one that you are showing, or could have been something else as well. But I can see that you are focusing on the functional side of it. That is another comment. And then, like Gabe was saying, the standing tables, I understand that the bars, the vertical bars, are part of the mechanical system that you're using, but they kind of emulate legs, so that give us that impression. But I think those elements can be maybe handled in a different way, so they do not emulate legs, but something else. Um, so it's just a detail. Otherwise, everything looks good. And again, uh, you were focusing on the functional side, which is one of the main purposes of your goals. So thank you so much, Anita. Looks great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, Anita, I think we're all a little bit more aware of our working environment right now, of the lighting scenarios that we are set up with, and we have you to thank for that. So excellent job. Thank you so much. And let's show her our appreciation.